She screamed, "Get him out," as the monitors beeped and the storm raged outside. A secretary in labor, a billionaire CEO in the hallway, forbidden from entering, and a newborn's first cry slicing through the silence. How did it come to this? He was the man who signed her future away with a single stroke of a pen. She was the woman who carried both heartbreak and hope into motherhood. He chose power. She chose love, and the cost was a child born between them. Can a man who once abandoned his family prove, step by step, that he has learned to stay? Can a woman who built walls around her heart allow them to crack open again? And when trust has been shattered, can it ever be rebuilt not with words, but with the slow rhythm of daily presence? This is not a story of sudden miracles. It is a story of second chances, of love tested by silence, and of a little girl who became the bridge between two broken hearts. If this journey touches you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's begin. Snow was falling thick and heavy over Manhattan, soft flakes swirling in the yellow glow of streetlights. The city, usually roaring with horns and voices, felt muted under the storm. Inside the grand stone walls of New York Presbyterian, warmth clashed with panic. The intercom had called for donors with rare blood types, and Alexander Reed had answered. He was a man accustomed to signing checks that moved millions. Yet tonight, he came with only his veins to offer. He rolled up his sleeve in a sterile room, the paper bracelet biting into his wrist. The nurse thanked him briskly, unaware of who he was. That suited him. He preferred the anonymity. But as the tube filled crimson under fluorescent light, a murmur passed through the staff. The recipient was in labor. She was losing more than she could afford. Alex walked out, buttoning his coat, expecting nothing more than a ride home through the storm. But then he heard the name, Claire Monroe. The syllables landed like a strike to the chest. His vision narrowed. Claire, his former secretary, the woman he had once leaned on for every detail of his impossible schedule, the woman whose laughter had softened his late nights, the woman he had let go, with silence and signatures, because ambition had demanded it. He pushed past a gurney, his polished shoes squeaking on the disinfected floor. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and faint coffee, a mixture of life and exhaustion. A monitor beeped steadily from the delivery wing. Nurses rushed by, their sneakers squealing on tile. He followed the sound without permission, heart hammering against the starched collar of his shirt. At the doorway, he froze. Claire was on the bed, her face pale against the white sheets, hair damp with sweat. Straps held monitors against her belly. The green line on the screen spiked and fell in jagged waves. Her hands clutched the rails, knuckles white. The moment their eyes met, time collapsed. Years of boardrooms and contracts, the distance he had built like armor, all dissolved into raw recognition. She gasped not from pain, but from seeing him. "Get him out!" Her voice cracked through the room, louder than the machines. The words were meant for the staff, but they hit him like a sentence. A nurse stepped in front of him, palm up. "Sir, you can't be here." He tried to explain. He had just given blood. He wanted only to make sure she was safe. But Claire's cry rose again, sharp, desperate, edged with old wounds. Out hands pressed gently against his chest, guiding him back into the hall. The door shut fast, cutting him off from the heat of her pain. He stood in the corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of bleach sharp in his nose. He could hear the chaos inside the doctor urging, the steady beeping climbing, Claire's ragged breath. He pressed his palm to the door, as if touch could pierce the wood. Minutes dragged. A cleaner's cart rattled past. The storm pressed against the tall windows, shadows of flakes racing down the glass. He sank onto a molded plastic chair, his body too large for the fragile frame. His sleeve was rolled up still, a square of gauze taped where the needle had been. Then it came the thin, piercing wail of a newborn. It cut through the hallway, through his ribs, straight to the hollow place in his chest. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting it fill him. The sound was life. The sound was his daughter. But he was not there to see her. Not the first breath, not the first grasp of tiny fists. He was a stranger on the other side of a locked door. A nurse walked past, carrying a clipboard, murmuring the name Lily Grace. The words brushed against him like a blessing he was not allowed to claim. He whispered it once, quietly, tasting the syllables, knowing already it would haunt him. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring at the scuffed tile beneath his shoes. His mind ran back through years of choices deals closed, contracts signed, nights when he had left messages unanswered. He had believed success meant protection, but it had bought only distance. Now, distance had become exile. The hallway grew quieter. The storm outside muffled the world. Alex sat motionless, the tape on his arm itching, the cold seeping through the bench. His heart carried a weight heavier than any boardroom loss. He looked at his hand, the faint stain of blood beneath the gauze. It had kept Claire alive tonight. Maybe that was something, but it was not enough. The question rose like a whisper he could not ignore. Where did he begin? The door had shut, but the story had not ended. Every tender love carries a small fracture. It may not be visible at first, but with time and pressure, it grows. Alex would not realize how deep the crack ran until it was too late. The summer sun reflected off the glass towers of Midtown, making the headquarters of Reed Grid gleam like a monument to power. Inside, the air conditioning hummed steadily, cooling the constant shuffle of assistants, analysts, and executives. For most, the building was intimidating. For Claire Monroe, it had become a second home. She had been Alex Reed's executive secretary for 2 years. Her desk sat just outside his office, a fortress of glass and steel, where deals worth billions were whispered over coffee. Claire managed more than schedules. She anticipated moods, calmed tempers, and found quiet solutions before problems reached his desk. That summer was brutal. A major merger was underway, one that would double the company's reach. Meetings ran from dawn until long past sunset. Flight plans changed hourly. Contracts arrived thicker than phone books. And through it all, Claire kept the rhythm steady. She learned which days Alex skipped lunch and slipped a sandwich on his desk without a word. She set reminders not only for his board calls, but for his mother's birthday, knowing he would forget. She typed notes in shorthand, only she could read, then left him handwritten summaries on pale yellow paper. Late nights became routine. When most of the building emptied, the two of them remained, the hum of the city below drifting through the glass. Alex worked in shirt sleeves, tie loosened, while Claire tapped quietly at her keyboard. Between them, a coffee pot sputtered, filling the air with the sharp smell of dark roast. It was in those hours that the lines blurred. Claire was younger, 35, but she carried herself with calm maturity. She had a way of listening that made Alex feel steadier, less trapped by the walls of his own ambition. He began to look forward to the small moments, the way she slid a fresh legal pad across the desk without being asked, the way she nudged a space heater closer to his chair on nights when the air grew too cold. There were trips, 2 quick flights to Boston, Chicago, Houston. Claire handled the tickets, the hotel rooms, the endless shuffle of papers. They ate in airport lounges, sometimes in silence, sometimes laughing at the absurdity of it all. Once, during a thunderstorm delay at Logan, they sat on the floor near the gate, sharing a bag of pretzels and stories about childhood summers. For Alex, who rarely revealed himself to anyone, it was a crack in the armor, yet the imbalance was always there. He was the CEO, the man in the tailored suit. She was the secretary, efficient, discreet, replaceable in the eyes of the company, and the company made the rules clear: no relationships between superiors and subordinates. Reed Grid was too visible, too scrutinized, to risk scandal. Still, something quiet was blooming. It wasn't spoken, not in words. It lived in the careful way Claire refilled his mug before a meeting, in the way Alex slowed his stride so she could catch up in the hall. It was in the pauses, the glances that lingered longer than professional courtesy required. One evening, the office nearly deserted. Alex looked up from a contract and found Claire watching him. She smiled faintly, weary from the week, and passed him a note with a single line. "Don't forget to breathe." He laughed for the first time in days, the sound startling in the silence. It was dangerous, he knew, but it felt necessary. The moment that sealed it came on an ordinary night. The clock neared midnight, papers lay scattered, coffee gone cold. Claire leaned over his desk, pointing out a misplaced decimal in a contract. Their hands brushed, just a slip of skin against skin. Both froze. The contact was small, accidental, but it felt like a spark striking dry tinder. Alex pulled back quickly, his chest tightening. Claire lowered her eyes, cheeks flushed. Neither spoke, but the room felt changed, charged with something that neither could deny. For the first time in years, Alex felt something unfamiliar. Need. Not the ambition that drove him, not the hunger for success, but the need for another person's presence. It scared him more than any deal ever had. That fear would grow. It would shape the choice that would shatter them. But on that night, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet of a sleeping city, it was only the beginning. A signature in a boardroom can seal a fortune. It can also break a heart. The boardroom at Reed Grid was a temple of glass and chrome, perched above the city like a watchtower. The skyline stretched wide behind it, but inside, the air was tight, the voices sharper than usual. The merger was weeks from finalization. Billions sat on the line, along with Alex Reed's reputation as the man who could carry anything across the finish line. Lawyers filled half the table, their folders stacked like bricks. On the other side, directors leaned forward, their expressions carved from caution and greed. The room buzzed with urgency. And then came the question, wrapped in polite phrasing, aimed like a spear. "We've been informed about your executive secretary. This cannot continue." Alex sat still, his hand tightened on the Mont Blanc pen he always carried, but his face betrayed nothing. He had trained himself for this never reveal, never flinch. The general counsel spoke next, laying out company policy, the risk of scandal, the way a single rumor could rattle shareholders. Relationships between superiors and subordinates are strictly prohibited. We need clarity, Mr. Reed. The merger depends on it. Clarity. The word echoed in his chest like a hammer strike. He knew what they wanted. They didn't want his explanation. They wanted distance, documented and final. They wanted Claire Monroe gone. He signed the papers, no protest, no defense, just a line of ink across a page, smooth as always. It was the most efficient way to silence the storm, to keep the machine moving. Afterward, he told himself he had chosen the company, the deal, the thousands of employees depending on it. He told himself Claire would understand, that she was resilient, that perhaps she had seen this ending coming. He told himself many things, but none dulled the sting of silence. Claire was called into human resources the next morning. She walked through the lobby she had crossed 1,000 times. But this time, her badge failed at the turnstile. The security guard waved her through with polite sympathy. Inside, the HR officer offered clipped phrases, severance packages, non-disclosure agreements. Claire sat rigid, hearing only the undertone. "You don't belong here anymore." She gathered her things into a cardboard box framed photos, a potted plant she had kept alive through winters, a stack of notes in her looping handwriting. She didn't see Alex. She didn't expect to. His office door stayed shut. The blinds were drawn. Humiliation burned in her chest as she walked out past the receptionist, past the revolving doors, into the blur of midtown traffic. The city roared, but inside she felt hollow. Days later, she stood in the bathroom of her small apartment, the light above the mirror buzzing faintly. The air smelled faintly of lavender soap. In her hand was a plastic stick, the window filled with 2 clear lines. Positive. She sat down hard on the edge of the tub, the cool porcelain steadying her shaking legs. Her thoughts scattered, fear pressed in first rent. Medical bills, the loneliness of nights ahead. Anger followed, sharp and bitter. He had let her go with a pen stroke, with silence, with no explanation. And yet, here she was, carrying a piece of him she could never erase. She tried to call once. The number reached his office. A cheerful assistant answered, crisp and professional. Claire asked for Alex. The woman paused, then replied, "Mr. Reed isn't available. May I take a message?" Claire hesitated, then said quietly, "Just tell him it's personal." The next day, she tried again. This time the same voice told her, "All personal matters are to be redirected through HR." The words were careful, memorized, meant to wall her out. Claire understood. Alex had given the order. Something hardened in her then. If he would not hear her, she would not ask again. She applied for work where her skills could still serve. A pediatric clinic on the Upper West Side needed an office manager, someone who could balance schedules, calm parents, keep the wheels turning. Claire took the job. The pay was less. The hours were long, but the work mattered. Each day, she saw children carried in with runny noses, scraped knees, anxious mothers asking if the fever would break. She told herself she would manage. At night, she read pamphlets about prenatal care. She circled dates on a wall calendar. She cooked simple meals, oatmeal, soups, roasted chicken, though her appetite wavered. The apartment grew quieter as the months passed, but inside her belly, life stirred. That soundless flutter was her anchor. Alex never called, never wrote. His world spun with mergers and press conferences. Hers shrank to subway rides, doctor visits, and the soft heartbeat she heard on ultrasound monitors. The fracture between them widened, from crack to canyon. She stopped imagining what he might say if he knew. She stopped hoping he might walk through her door. Silence became a wall, thick and unyielding. One evening, she stood at her bathroom mirror again, brushing her hair back with a trembling hand. The mirror reflected a woman, changed eyes, tired, shoulders squared with resolve. Behind her, on the counter, lay the faded test stick, tucked into its paper sleeve. She had kept it, not as a reminder of him, but as proof of the moment her life turned. She whispered to her reflection, "It's just us now." The words steadied her. The decision was hers. She would carry this child. She would raise it alone if she had to. The boardroom had taken her job. His silence had taken her trust. But neither would take this life. Some children enter the world with a cry. Others arrive to the sound of an adult's sob. Lily Grace Monroe Reed came with both. The storm outside had thickened by nightfall. Snow blew sideways across Broadway, piling against the hospital's revolving doors. Inside, the fluorescent lights glared, steady and merciless, as if they could hold the chaos back. Claire Monroe lay on a delivery bed, her face damp with sweat, her hair plastered to her temples. Straps pressed against her swollen belly, monitors chirping in the uneven bursts. Nurses moved quickly around her, voices sharp but calm, preparing for a complication they had seen too many times before. Her blood pressure dropped, the screen flashing warnings. Typo negative. Someone called. We need it now. In the donation room. Alex Reed lifted his arm without hesitation. The needles slid in. His blood ran dark and steady through a plastic tube. He watched it fill the bag, his jaw tight, his body tense as though he could will strength into every drop. He had never felt so powerless. When the nurse removed the needle, she thanked him. He barely nodded, already moving toward the maternity wing. He followed the sound of rushing feet, the squeak of shoes against polished tile, the scent of antiseptic mixed with faint coffee. At the doorway, he stopped. Claire was there, fragile and fierce at once, clinging to the rails of the bed. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, their gazes locked. Then her voice tore through the room. "Get him out." The words shook the air, sharper than the machines. A nurse blocked his path, hands outstretched. "Sir, you can't be here." "But he tried to speak, tried to explain, but Claire's cry rose again. "Out." The door closed fast, leaving him in the corridor. He pressed his palm to the wood, feeling nothing but smooth paint beneath his skin. Behind it came the rush of commands, the urgent tones of doctors, the ragged sound of Claire's breathing. A rolling cart rattled by, the smell of iodine trailing with it. Alex sank onto a hard plastic chair. His sleeve was still rolled up, a square of gauze taped to his arm. He stared at it, at the faint red stain, as though proof of his part in this moment. It was his blood keeping her alive, his daughter's life tied to his veins. The minutes stretched long. He counted each beep from the monitors beyond the door, each muffled command, each cry that broke the air. He tried to imagine what Claire felt: fear, pain, the raw strength of a body fighting to bring life into the world. But he couldn't. He had lived his life controlling rooms, bending numbers, dictating outcomes. Here, he had no power. And then, piercing through it all, came the thin wail of a newborn. The sound froze him. It was fragile, sharp, alive. It sliced through the sterile corridor, through the layers of distance he had built, and landed deep inside his chest. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, tears burned behind his lids. A nurse walked briskly past with a clipboard, murmuring into her radio. He caught the name she spoke: Lily Grace. The syllables washed over him. Lily Grace. His daughter. The name felt like both a blessing and a punishment. He whispered it once, his voice barely audible, but he did not see her. He did not hold her. He was on the other side of the door, the stranger in his own story. The hallway grew quieter. The chaos inside subsided into softer sounds, wheels rolling, drawers closing, the murmur of nurses cleaning up. A man pushed a mop down the corridor, the faint scent of bleach spreading behind him. Alex barely noticed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the white floor. He thought of the boardroom, the signatures, the silence that had ended everything. He thought of Claire's face as she screamed for him to leave. He thought of the newborn cry that belonged to him, yet came from a world he was not permitted to enter. The storm outside pressed hard against the windows, shadows of snowflakes sliding down the glass. He shivered, though the heat vents blew warm air at his feet. The gauze on his arm itched. He pulled it off slowly, revealing a pinprick of red. It was nothing compared to what Claire had endured, yet it marked him all the same. He pictured her holding the baby, whispering the name again, Lily Grace. He imagined tiny fingers curling around hers, the way Claire's eyes might soften despite exhaustion. The picture ached because he wasn't in it. Still, he told himself, he had given something tonight. His blood had carried oxygen where hers faltered. That was a start, a thread. He clenched his fists. I won't vanish again. The vow formed silently, fierce, though he did not yet know how to keep it. The corridor stretched before him, white walls and sterile doors. Behind one of them lay Claire and the child he had never met. A fragile bond connected them now, thin as silk, nearly invisible. But it was enough to make him stay seated, waiting, long after the rest of the world had moved on. In court, truth is distilled cold, but hearts are never cold. The family court building on Center Street was gray, heavy, almost indifferent to the lives shuffled through its doors. Outside, reporters gathered in knots, their breath visible in the chill air. Camera shutters clicked, questions flew, but Alex Reed kept his head down as he walked inside. His tailored coat could not shield him from the weight of what awaited. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of wood polish and paper. Fluorescent lights hummed, the benches creaked as people shifted. Claire Monroe sat at one table, her posture straight, hands folded in her lap. Her lawyer leaned close, whispering something she barely heard. Claire's eyes stayed fixed on the judge's bench, refusing to glance toward the man across the aisle. Alex sat opposite, his own attorney flipping through files. He wanted to look at Claire, to read her expression, but she did not turn. The distance between them felt wider than the aisle, wider than the years. The proceedings began with routine language, case numbers, dates, legal phrases stripped of emotion. Then came the DNA results. The clerk read them in a monotone. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. Alex's chest tightened. He had known the truth, yet hearing it announced to the room carved it into stone. Claire closed her eyes briefly, as though the words were salt on a wound she had already carried. The judge, a woman with silver hair and glasses perched low on her nose, spoke firmly. Mr. Reed is confirmed as the biological father. We will now determine custody and visitation. Claire's lawyer rose. His tone was measured, but each word carried steel. He spoke of abandonment, of Claire's difficult pregnancy, of nights spent alone. He described Alex's absence, his silence, his failure to acknowledge the child until forced by circumstance. Each detail landed like a gavel strike. Alex listened, hands folded, face still. He wanted to argue, to say he had made mistakes but wanted to repair them. Yet he knew the courtroom was not a place for apologies. Here, only evidence mattered. His own lawyer stood and offered a defense. He mentioned Alex's steady career, his financial stability, his ability to provide. He pointed out the blood donation the night of the birth. But even as the words filled the air, Alex sensed their weakness. Money was not love. Blood was not presence. The judge conferred with notes. Silence pressed heavy. Then she spoke, her voice cool, her decision sharp as glass. Visitation is granted under supervision, 2 hours per week, in a monitored setting. Child support to be paid according to state guidelines. Claire exhaled slowly, her lips pressed thin. She had braced for this. For her. It was protection. A barrier strong enough to shield Lily from disappointment. Alex felt the words sink like weights. Supervised visitation, 2 hours. A permission slip to see his own child. It was both a gift and a punishment. Outside, the press pounced. Headlines flashed across phones before the ink could dry. CEO ordered to pay. Child support to former secretary. Online, the comments multiplied. Some mocked, some speculated, some pitied Claire, others accused her. The noise spread like wildfire, but none of it mattered compared to the silence between the two at the center. After court, Claire gathered her things with deliberate calm. She avoided Alex's gaze as she walked out, her heels clicking steady on the tile floor. Her lawyer followed, carrying a folder thick with documents. Alex remained seated for a moment longer. The room emptied, leaving only the echo of footsteps. He stared at the polished wood of the table, tracing the grain with his eyes. He had won deals worth billions in rooms like this. But here, with a single ruling, he had lost the right to call himself a father without conditions. When he finally rose, his attorney handed him a paper with the visitation schedule. The first appointment was Saturday, 2 o'clock, at a family center downtown. The words blurred as he read them. It felt less like an opportunity and more like a probation sentence. That afternoon, he went to the glass window of the nursery where Lily had been moved for observation. Nurses carried infants back and forth, their cries muffled by the thick pain. When Lily appeared, wrapped in a hospital blanket, Alex pressed his hand to the glass. She was so small, her features soft, her eyelids fluttering in restless sleep. A guard stood nearby, indifferent, checking his watch. The scene drove home the truth his fatherhood was a privilege granted by the court, timed, watched, limited. He whispered her name, though she could not hear him. Lily Grace. His breath fogged the glass, fading fast. As he turned away, the paper schedule crinkled in his pocket. Saturday, 2 hours. He would be there. He would not miss it. Yet the question gnawed at him, what could a man prove in 2 hours? Once a week, he left the courthouse without speaking to the press. Snow had melted into gray slush on the sidewalks. The city carried on, indifferent. Inside, Alex walked alone, his coat collar up against the wind, the silence around him heavier than the noise outside. He knew the battle had only begun. Making amends does not come from a single apology. It comes from small steps, repeated until they build trust. Alex Reed had always solved problems with speed, a call, a signature, a decisive move. But this was different. Fatherhood could not be signed into being. Trust could not be bought. So, he started with what he could manage, showing up, again and again. On Monday nights, he walked into a small room in Washington Heights where folding chairs formed a circle. The group was modest men of different ages, some weary, some restless. They all shared one trait, a history of running away. The counselor, a soft-spoken man with graying hair, guided them gently. "My name is Alex," he said at his first session, the words awkward in his mouth. "I have avoided responsibility, and I don't want to anymore." He brought a notebook, writing after each meeting. At first the words were stiff schedules, summaries, quotes from the counselor, but slowly, his notes turned inward. Fear is easier than trust. Distance feels safe, but distance leaves you alone. On weekends, he volunteered at the Washington Heights Community Center. The tasks were simple. He stacked folding chairs, carried boxes of donated clothes to the basement, set up tables for story hour. His wealth and name meant nothing here. He was just another pair of hands. When story time came, children gathered in a half circle, their sneakers tapping against the floor. Alex sat down with a book in his lap, reading aloud. His voice was steady, deep, carrying the words across the room. The children leaned closer. Some giggled. One little boy asked if he could turn the page himself. Afterward, Alex helped serve hot cocoa. He ladled carefully into small paper cups, the steam fogging his glasses. He wiped spills with a rag, not minding the sticky counter. For the first time in years, he felt useful in a way that did not involve contracts or money. He also enrolled in a community class on infant care, in a brightly lit room filled with young parents. He sat awkwardly with a plastic doll. The instructor showed how to change a diaper. His first attempt was clumsy. He put it on backward, earning a ripple of laughter. Alex smiled sheepishly, then tried again. By the third attempt, he managed it correctly, tucking the tabs snug without pinching. He learned how to swaddle, how to hold a baby so its neck was supported, how to tell if a bottle was too hot. He practiced burping techniques on the doll, patting its back until the instructor nodded. He took notes carefully, as if preparing for a board meeting. When the class ended, he stopped by a store on the way home. He bought blankets, bottles, a small stuffed bear. No designer labels, no embossed initials. Just plain, useful things. He paid in cash, quietly, not wanting anyone to think this was a show. Claire received reports from the court-appointed monitor. They described his attendance, his efforts, his patience. She read them with a skeptical eye. People could perform when watched. She had learned that lesson too well. Yet there was one story that lingered with her. During story hour, a frail child with thinning hair had taken Alex's hand. The boy had held on, refusing to let go even after the reading ended. The monitor wrote, "Mr." Reed stayed seated until the boy was ready, his other hand holding the book still open. He seemed moved by the moment. Alex had gone home that evening, with the faint imprint of small fingers still tingling in his palm. Sitting in his apartment, surrounded by silence, he stared at his hand and thought, "This is what it means to be needed. This is what I want to be, someone worth holding on to." It was a fragile beginning. He knew Claire did not trust him yet. He did not blame her. Trust would not return overnight, but he also knew that change was not about grand gestures. It was about showing up with the same steady steps. No matter who was watching. On his desk, his old pen lay unused. Beside it, a new object rested, a folded sheet with scribbled notes from class, smudged with cocoa stains. Not contracts, not mergers, just reminders about feeding schedules and safe sleep positions. He kept it close, a map for a different kind of success. The weeks moved forward. Each visit to the community center, each note written in his journal, was another small stone laid on a path he hoped would lead back to his daughter. And though Claire's heart stayed guarded, something shifted. She began to wonder, quietly, if perhaps the man who once vanished was learning how to stay. When a man asks for more time with his child, he is asking for both responsibility and weight. The snow had softened since the last storm, but patches of ice still clung to the courthouse steps. Alex Reed climbed them carefully, a folder tucked under his arm. He had walked into many hearings in his life, antitrust cases, shareholder suits, corporate negotiations, but never one like this. This was not about money or power. This was about hours on a calendar, hours he wanted to fill with his daughter's laughter. Inside, the courtroom was the same as before, wood benches, pale walls, the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Claire Monroe sat at her table, her posture as straight as a blade. She wore a dark coat, her hair pulled back, her face calm but guarded. Her lawyer, Colin Hayes, shuffled papers beside her. Alex wished he could read her mind, but her eyes never strayed toward him. The judge, the same woman as last time, called the case to order. "We are here to consider Mr. Reed's petition for expanded visitation." Alex's lawyer rose. He outlined the petition in simple terms. Alex had restructured his schedule. He no longer traveled weekly. He had delegated key tasks to his executives. He had adjusted his work so his life could revolve around Lily's needs. Then Alex himself stood. His voice was steady, though his palms felt damp. "Your Honor, I've prepared my apartment for her. Cabinet locks, outlet covers, a crib assembled in her room. I have a pediatrician within walking distance. My hours are clear. I want to be more than a visitor 2 hours a week." The judge nodded, then turned to Claire. Claire rose slowly. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the room. "Lily needs consistency. She's still so young. She needs one rhythm, one home where she feels safe. I am not against her father's presence. But sudden changes, long stretches away, they confuse children. I want what steadies her, not what satisfies an adult's guilt." The words were measured, but each one hit Alex hard. He did not flinch. He knew she spoke truth. The judge leaned back, tapping her glasses against her notes. Silence filled the room, heavy, stretching. Finally, she spoke. "The court acknowledges Mr. Reed's efforts. However, the child's welfare is paramount. Visitation will be expanded in stages. For the next 3 months, Mr. Reed will have 4 hours weekly, supervised. If he maintains consistency, no absences, no late arrivals, he will move to unsupervised daytime visits. Overnight stays will be considered after 6 months of compliance." The words fell like stones. Neither side won, neither side lost. Alex exhaled, shoulders heavy. He had hoped for more, yet feared less. 4 hours was still a sliver, but it was wider than before. It was something he could build on. Claire sat down, her jaw tight. She did not look triumphant. This was not victory. It was obligation. She wanted stability for Lily, not battles. The gavel struck once, sharp, case adjourned. The courtroom emptied slowly. Lawyers packed papers. Clerks stacked files. Claire buttoned her coat and walked out without turning back. Alex lingered, holding the new schedule in his hand. The columns of dates stared back at him like a test he could not fail. Outside, the air was thin and cold. Snowflakes drifted lightly, clinging to his coat. He stood on the steps for a moment, the paper folded in his pocket. He thought of the months ahead arriving on time, every time, proving not with words, but with presence. For the first time, he felt the weight not just of loss, but of responsibility. This was not about Claire's forgiveness, not about the court's approval. It was about Lily, and showing her that her father could be steady, even when the rest of the world was not. He pulled his collar up against the wind and walked down the steps. The city carried on around him, cabs honking, people rushing by, headlines shifting on phone screens. None of it mattered. What mattered was the paper in his pocket, the hours marked on it, and the promise he had silently made he would be there. The test had begun. Big trust is built from small proofs, repeated until they take root. The first diaper change nearly broke Alex. His hands, steady enough to sign contracts worth millions, shook as he lifted the tiny body onto the padded table. The straps of the diaper confused him, front, back. Which tab went where Lily squirmed, her legs kicking with surprising strength. He fumbled, almost tore the adhesive strip. Sweat gathered at his temple. The monitor from the family center stood nearby, clipboard ready. Alex ignored the watchful eyes and tried again. He breathed, slowed his hands, tucked the diaper snug. It wasn't perfect, but it held. The monitor nodded. Alex felt an odd rush of pride, absurd but real. That night, he started a notebook. On the first page, he wrote in block letters, Lily's journal. He logged every detail he could gather. Hours of sleep, ounces of milk, how long she cried before settling. He made columns, drew lines, left space for notes. It became his map through unfamiliar territory. Each week brought new tasks. He scheduled a pediatric appointment, arriving early to fill out forms. He stood in line at the clinic, rocking Lily gently in her carrier, whispering nonsense words to soothe her. When the nurse called her name, Alex carried her inside, his steps slow and careful, as if each tile might shift beneath him. Vaccinations made her wail, her face turning red. Alex held her against his chest, whispering, his hand rubbing circles on her back until the sobs eased. He wrote afterward in the journal, 2 shots, brave, calmed in 7 minutes, at home. He learned to make oatmeal. He mashed bananas, stirred applesauce, tested the temperature with his finger. The first batch clumped too thick. Lily spat it out with a grimace. He tried again, adding more water, stirring until smooth. This time she swallowed, her small mouth opening for more. Alex smiled, relief washing over him. He noted the recipe, determined to remember. He washed bottles by hand, rinsing each with scalding water, shaking the drops loose, lining them neatly on a towel. He sterilized nipples in a pot on the stove, watching steam cloud the kitchen. He folded burp cloths, stacked them in even piles, hung damp towels to dry across a rack. Mistakes came often. He forgot a blanket once, and Lily shivered. He packed the wrong size bottle, leaving her hungry halfway through a visit. Each failure stung, but he corrected them. He made checklists, taped reminders by the door. He refused to complain. Claire received the reports. She read about his punctuality, his attempts, his errors. At first she doubted. She had seen him orchestrate entire corporations. Was this just another performance, tailored for observers? But then came the moment that pierced her doubt. During one visit, Lily had grown restless, her cries sharp, her fists clenched. Alex tried rocking, humming, walking the room. Nothing worked. At last, exhausted, she collapsed against his shoulder, her cheek pressed to his collarbone. Alex froze, afraid to move. He felt the warmth of her breath against his skin, the weight of trust in her small body. Slowly, her cries faded into soft whimpers, then into sleep. The monitor recorded it plainly. Child soothed by father, slept peacefully for 40 minutes. But the plain words did not capture the scene. Claire saw it herself, through the glass window. She had come early, intending only to collect Lily at the end of the session. Instead, she stood still, watching as her daughter slept soundly on the man she had once sworn to keep away. For the first time, she saw no panic in his movements, no fumbling, no mask of confidence, just patience, steady and unforced. A crack opened in the wall she had built, small, fragile, but undeniable. That night, Claire sat at her kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She thought of Lily's peaceful face, the way her tiny body had melted into rest. She whispered to herself, maybe. She didn't finish the sentence. Trust was not yet restored, but the thought had entered her mind. And so, as snow tapped gently against her window, Claire considered something she had sworn never to allow. She thought of asking the court to expand visitation, to let Alex try without a monitor watching every move. It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. It was simply space, a neutral ground where Lily could know her father without walls of glass between them. The possibility lingered like a fragile flame, flickering but alive. When the tide of public opinion rises, people reveal what they truly value. It began with a headline, CEO's Secret, past the secretary, the baby, and the silence. The article ran in a major business magazine, splashed with grainy photos of Claire leaving the courthouse, Alex behind her, eyes down. The piece speculated about non-disclosure agreements, questioned timelines, painted a picture of betrayal dressed in corporate polish. Other outlets followed, online blogs amplified the story. Talk shows debated it. Was Claire a victim, an opportunist? Was Alex a cold executive or a man struggling to change? Hashtags trended, stock tickers shifted. The story spread faster than he could track. The board summoned him within a day. In the tall glass conference room, faces stared at him across a table polished to a mirror. Shine. We need this contained, the chairman said. Issue a statement, deny, pay whatever settlements are needed. Sign an NDA with her. Make this disappear. Alex sat still, his reflection staring back at him in the glossy surface. For years he had obeyed that rhythm: contain, control, silence. But silence had already cost him more than he could bear. No, he said quietly, no NDA, no settlement. The room erupted with disbelief. Voices rose, citing shareholder losses, brand damage, the fragility of the merger. Alex listened, unmoved. Finally, he stood. If the company needs distance, I'll step aside, temporarily. His words fell like a hammer. For a man who had built his career on control, surrendering his title was unthinkable. Yet Alex walked out of the tower that evening, no longer its CEO. The city outside was relentless. Photographers followed, cameras flashing, questions shouted. He didn't answer. He hailed a cab, gave the driver an address far from the office. That Saturday, he arrived at the family center at 2 sharp. His coat was plain, his bag simple. Inside, he carried a thermos of warm water, a small towel, and Lily's favorite puree. Reporters had tried to follow, but here there were no cameras, just a father, his daughter, and the hours given by the court. Lily fussed at first, restless from the noise outside. Alex unzipped his bag, poured warm water into the bottle, tested a drop on his wrist. He wrapped her in the towel, cradled her gently, fed her slowly. His movements were steady, practiced now, no panic in his hands. Claire arrived to pick Lily up. She expected to see him shaken, distracted by scandal. Instead, she found him calm, focused only on their daughter. He had not flinched, not once. For years, she had watched him retreat when pressure mounted, choosing silence over presence. But here, in the eye of a public storm, he had chosen to stay, to keep showing up. The next week, the press turned sharper. CEO abandons throne amid baby scandal. Analysts speculated about his downfall, about what it meant for Reed Grid. Yet, at the family center, nothing shifted. 2 o'clock, Alex arrived on time. He carried the same bag. He logged Lily's nap in his notebook, wiped her mouth with the towel, sang softly when she fussed. The week after, the cycle repeated. Noise outside, steadiness inside. One afternoon, after a long session, Claire lingered by the door as he packed Lily's things. She watched the small rituals: folding the towel, cleaning the bottle, zipping the bag. They were ordinary acts, but each was evidence. He was not running. For Alex, the loss of his title cut deep. He had lived decades defined by it, but when he looked at Lily's small hand gripping his finger, the sharp ache dulled. Power was gone, but presence remained. And for the first time, he realized presence mattered more. The scandal still raged. Reporters still speculated. Investors demanded answers. But between the 3 of them, father, mother, child, a thin thread of trust had begun to form. It was fragile. It could snap, yet it was real. A blizzard has a way of silencing everything. Streets go quiet. Phones lose signal. Even the loudest headlines fade. What remains is presence. The nor'easter swept across the Hudson Valley just after dusk. Winds howled, snow hammered rooftops, and then the lights went out. In Claire's rented house, Darkness fell sharp and sudden. The hum of appliances ceased. The baby monitor blinked off. The air grew heavy in the stillness. Lily stirred in her crib, her small chest tight with the wheeze of winter asthma. The nebulizer, her lifeline, sat useless without power. Claire's heart raced. She wrapped Lily in a blanket, rocking gently, whispering prayers into the cold air. Miles away. Alex's phone buzzed with the outage alert. He knew Claire's neighborhood, knew its fragile grid. He didn't wait. He drove to the Reed Grid warehouse, unlocked a steel gate, and hauled a portable microgrid into his truck bed. It was heavy, awkward, but he had installed hundreds in disaster zones. Tonight, it was for one child. The roads were treacherous, snow piling high, wind battering the windshield. The truck fishtailed twice, tires spinning against ice. Alex gripped the wheel, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the road ahead. His coat lay across the passenger seat, forgotten. Sweat dampened his shirt despite the cold. An hour later, he pulled into Claire's driveway, headlights cutting through the storm. He killed the engine, stepped into knee-deep snow, and unloaded the generator. The wind clawed at his face, freezing his breath to ice. On the porch, he set the machine down, adjusted the fuel line, checked the voltage. His hands stung, fingers stiff, but he worked slowly, carefully. He poured gasoline from a red can, the fumes sharp in the night air. The first pull of the cord sputtered. The second roared to life. The hum spread, steady and low, pushing back the silence. Inside, lights flickered on. The heater hummed. The nebulizer whirred. Claire pressed the mask gently against Lily's face, relief washing through her as the mist curled into the child's lungs. Through the curtain, she saw him. Alex sat on the porch step, the storm whipping snow into his hair. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the generator. He didn't knock, didn't ask to come in. He only checked the fuel gauge, listened to the rhythm of the engine, and stayed. Hours passed, snow thickened, winds shifted. Every so often, Alex rose, refilled the tank, wiped frost from the gauge. His gloves froze stiff. His shoulders shook with cold. Still, he stayed. Claire peeked again from behind the curtain. She saw the man who once hid from closeness, who had signed her out of his life with a pen stroke. Now he sat in the storm, refusing to leave. No cameras, no audience, just the sound of the generator, steady as a heartbeat. She wrapped Lily tighter, her own chest tight with something she had not allowed in years, uncertain hope. Midnight came, then 2. The storm raged, but inside the house, warmth held. Lily slept, her breaths easier, her body still. Claire moved from window to crib, restless, listening to the machine outside. At dawn, the storm softened. Gray light spilled across the valley, pale and muted. Snow lay heavy on branches, fences, rooftops. On the porch, the generator still hummed, steady and reliable. Alex sat beside it, his head bowed, frost clinging to his hair. He had not left his post. Claire pressed her hand against the glass, not to wave, not to call him in, but as if to acknowledge what she saw. The man outside was not the one she remembered. This was someone new, willing to bear discomfort, willing to lose sleep, willing to stay when it mattered most. She whispered softly, "Maybe." The word faded before it finished, behind her. Lily stirred, stretching in her crib, her cheeks rosy from warmth. Claire lifted her, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and looked once more through the window. The generator purred. The man stayed. And somewhere deep inside, a decision was beginning to take shape. Mature love knows when to hold on, and when to let go, so the other can find peace. The offer came in a plain envelope, slid across Claire's desk at the pediatric clinic. Portland, Maine, a management position at a new facility, housing included, a quieter town, far from headlines, far from whispers in Manhattan coffee shops. She read it twice, her fingers brushing the letterhead. The words seemed to promise clean air, calm streets, a place where Lily could grow without shadows. That evening, Claire sat at her kitchen table, the envelope beside her teacup. Lily slept in the next room, the soft hiss of the baby monitor steady. Claire traced the rim of her mug, thinking of snow-dusted harbors, of mornings without fear of running into reporters. She imagined a life unchained from Alex's world, from the weight of a name that once cost her so much. When she told Alex, she expected resistance. She braced for persuasion, for the old instinct of control she had known too well. Instead, he listened quietly, hands folded, eyes steady. "If Portland is what's best for Lily," he said softly, "then Portland is what we'll do." The words unsettled her more than an argument would have. She searched his face, waiting for the condition, the hidden demand. None came. "I can set up a satellite office in New England," he continued. "Boston, maybe. Portland, if it makes sense. I'll commute, no matter what. I'll follow your lead. No negotiation. Just tell me how to show up." Claire felt the air shift. For years, Alex had lived by command, by strategy, by the need to win. Now he was offering presence without terms, respect in place of control. She wanted to doubt him. Part of her still held the memory of doors slammed, of silence thick as glass walls. But another part saw the man who had sat through a blizzard, guarding a generator for their daughter's breath. The man who had traded a title for 2 hours of visitation. Her chest tightened. The days that followed moved in slow rhythm. Claire weighed the offer like a stone in her palm, heavy and undeniable. At the clinic, she answered calls, scheduled checkups, smiled at parents who trusted her steadiness. At night, she folded baby clothes, washed bottles, watched Lily's chest rise and fall. One evening, Alex came by to drop off supplies, diapers, formula, nothing branded, nothing flashy. He left them at the door without stepping inside. Before leaving, he asked, "Do you need anything else?" "No," she answered quickly, more out of habit than truth. But as she closed the door, her throat tightened. He had not pushed, had not bargained. He had simply asked. Claire sat in the living room, Lily curled against her shoulder. She thought of Portland again. She imagined arriving, setting down roots, starting fresh. But she also pictured Alex's steady hands, the way Lily relaxed against his chest during visits. Could she uproot that? Could she take away the fragile bond that had only just begun? The choice pressed in, freedom on one side, family in a form she never thought possible. On the other, one night, after rocking Lily to sleep, Claire stood by the crib, watching her daughter's face soften in dreams. She whispered, "You deserve the best of us. Not the broken pieces, not the fear, the best." She turned toward the window. Snowflakes drifted under the streetlight, slow and silent. For the first time in years, she let her heart soften. Not because she forgot the past, but because she saw the present. Alex had let go of control, and in that release, he had given her something she hadn't felt from him before, space to choose without fear. The decision was not final yet. The envelope still sat on the table, waiting. But inside, a quiet shift had begun. Claire touched the edge of the crib, her voice low, steady. "Maybe we can build again, carefully, honestly." She did not know if Alex heard those words in the silence between them. But she knew one thing. For the first time, she wanted to try. There is no magic, only days strung together, each done right. Claire made her choice quietly. She did not mail the envelope back to Portland. She folded it, slipped it into a drawer, and left it there. New York was messy, noisy, imperfect, but it was where Lily's roots had begun, and where Alex had shown he was willing to grow. The new plan was simple, written on paper with careful lines. Co-parenting schedules, therapy sessions marked twice a month, household responsibilities divided clearly, no grand gestures, no vague promises, just structure. Alex embraced it with the same seriousness he once gave to mergers. But this time, the stakes were not investors, they were family. He kept a slim notebook in his jacket pocket, pages filled with Lily's appointments, her feeding preferences, the brand of applesauce she favored. He set reminders for vaccinations, logged each milestone with the precision of a man determined not to miss again. Dinners were quiet but steady, sometimes just pasta, a pan of roasted vegetables, a simple roast chicken. Alex learned to chop onions without complaint, to wash dishes while humming softly. Claire noticed he no longer filled silence with explanations. He simply did the work, letting consistency speak. Therapy sessions were awkward at first. Words tangled, old wounds surfaced, but they stayed in the room. Week after week, they practiced listening, speaking plainly, sitting with discomfort. The counselor reminded them trust grows like a seed, watered slowly, sheltered from storms. The months unfolded, and with them, small rituals. Alex picked Lily up from daycare on Tuesdays. Claire handled doctor visits on Thursdays. Saturdays became their shared day park walks. Grocery shopping, story hour at the library. The world still whispered, but inside their circle, steadiness took root. Then came the wedding. It was not grand, not gilded, just a brick church in the Hudson Valley, its walls worn with time, its windows glowing with soft amber light. Neighbors gathered, not out of spectacle, but support. Claire wore a simple dress, pale cream, her hair pinned back with delicate clips. Alex stood at the altar in a dark suit, his eyes steady, no longer the restless man she once knew. The vows were plain, no speeches about forever, no rehearsed poetry, just the truth, spoken with quiet weight. "I never stopped loving you," Alex said, but this time, it was not a defense or a plea. It was a way of naming the life he now chose each day. After the ceremony, the community shared a meal in the church hall, potluck dishes, mismatched chairs, laughter rising under wooden beams. There were no photographers, no headlines, only faces that had watched them stumble and now watched them begin again. In the corner, under strings of warm yellow lights, Lily took her first steps. Her tiny legs wobbled, arms outstretched. Claire held one hand, Alex the other. Together, they guided her across the wooden floor. The room quieted, smiles spreading as the child tottered forward, squealing with triumph. For Claire, it was the truest symbol, not the rings, not the papers, but the small fingers clutching both their hands. Lily did not know contracts or scandals. She only knew safety, the steady pull of two people walking beside her. As night settled, the three of them stepped outside. The valley air was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine. The church bell tower stood against the darkening sky, its outline sharp and familiar. Claire leaned against Alex's arm, Lily nestled between them. There was no rush of fireworks, no chorus of angels, only peace. Peace, Claire realized, was the highest peak. Not excitement, not victory, but the quiet relief of steadiness after storms. They drove home slowly, headlights carving paths through winding roads. Lily slept in her car seat, her thumb in her mouth, her breath even. Alex reached over, not to control the wheel, but to hold Claire's hand. She let him. At home, they carried Lily inside, laid her gently in her crib. They stood side by side, watching her chest rise and fall, the nightlight painting soft shapes across the walls. Claire whispered, "We'll get it wrong sometimes." Alex nodded, "Then we'll try again." The room held their promise, not grand, not perfect, but steady. Outside, the future stretched wide and unknown, but the door to it was open now, not with spectacle, but with daily proof. A family, rebuilt not on illusions, but on persistence. Life rarely gives us clean beginnings. More often, it gives us broken pieces and asks us to rebuild. This story reminds us that trust is not restored by one grand gesture, but by small, steady steps showing up when it matters, keeping promises, and choosing presence over pride. We learn that love, in its truest form, is not about control or victory. It is about respect, about letting go when necessary, and about holding on when it serves another's peace. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to admit our failures and begin again with humility. For those of us who have lived long enough to see both triumph and regret, this truth feels especially tender. Second chances are not guaranteed, but they are possible. Healing is slow, but it comes through daily choices. The quiet dinner, the hand held in silence, the simple act of being there. In the end, family is not defined by perfection, it is defined by persistence, forgiveness, and the courage to build again. Thank you so much for spending your time with this story. If it touched your heart, if it made you pause and reflect on love, family, and second chances, we invite you to help us share it further. Please like this video, share it with someone who might need a little hope today, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories. Your support keeps these stories alive, and we can't wait to walk this journey with you again.